Mark Fellows, one of the three men who has just been charged with the murder of Kyle Bevans. Now, a few people have been asking, who is Mark Fellows and what is he in prison for? Because I do have a very large amount of new subscribers to my channel who have not, or who are not familiar with Mark Fellows, because a lot of the people who are subscribed to my channel have never been to prison, they've never been in trouble, and they've never followed this type of content before. So I'm going to do a rundown on who Mark Fellows is, and if convicted of this murder, Mark Fellows will be a serial killer, because he is in prison for a double murder or two murders which were on separate occasions, which I am going to go over now. And for those offences, he is serving life without parole. And if you have watched the previous two videos, you will know when I've spoke about this recent murder, it will not make any difference whatsoever to his sentence. He will get another life sentence if convicted, and they will give him a minimum tariff, but it's just a whole load of nothing, because he will not serve an extra day for that murder, because he's doing life without parole anyways. He is never getting out of prison. So, what is a serial killer? So, I've just been Googling this, went on to AI, and a serial killer is a person who commits two or more murders in separate events, typically over a period of more than a month between the killings. This is different from mass murders who kill multiple people at once. So, key characteristics. So, multiple murders, which has happened in this case, like I say, if he's convicted, 3 murders. The murders occur in different events, not the same time or place. And motive. Killings are often driven by psychological needs like power, control, or gratification, which isn't in this case, rather than a single clear motive like robbery. So the psychological needs like power, control, that could come well into it with these murders. So Mark Fellows, nicknamed the Iceman, was born on the 5th of September 1980. This is off Wikipedia. I've got a few different articles here, so do bear with us when I'm flicking between them, people. It says he's an English hitman convicted of the murders of John Kinsella and Paul Massey, rival and enforcers to the anti-A-team criminal network. At the time of his conviction, he was one of only 70 prisoners sentenced to a whole life term. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the murders. Then I'm going to go on to another article which delves a little bit deeper into the murders and why they took place. So the Paul Massey murder was on the 26th of July 2015, where Paul Massey was shot dead outside his home on Manchester Road, Clifton, by a lone gunman. The killer was reported to have been wearing military-style fatigues and carrying a weapon similar to a submachine gun. Greater Manchester Police offered a 50 grand reward for information leading to the killer. So the second one, the John Kinsella murder, which was on the 5th of May 2018, where John Kinsella was shot dead near St Helens Linkway in Rainhill as he walked with his pregnant partner, Wendy Owen. The killer used encrypted EncroChat handsets to coordinate the murder. So the trial lasted 8 weeks with heavily armed police officers in attendance. His fellow criminal, Stephen Boyle, was also on trial. Boyle was described as Fellows' brother-in-arms and accused of acting as a spotter, watching the victims and providing assistance to the gunman. During the trial, evidence from a Garmin fitness watch with a GPS function found in Fellows' house was used to show that he had travelled from his home to a field opposite Paul Massey's home. So that was ultimately what led to his conviction on that one with that Garmin watch, which was found in his house when they were raiding it for the murder of John Kinsella. They came across that watch. which 3 years previously you wouldn't have thought that that type of data would still be held in the watch. Fellows was found guilty of the murders of both Massey and Kinsella, but found not guilty of the attempted murder of Owen. Sentenced for a whole life term for both their murders, and Boyle was convicted of the murder of Kinsella but cleared of the murder of Massey and the attempted murder of Owen. But I will talk a little bit about him further on because he ended up grassing, and that was another reason he was obviously convicted. The Garmin watch and his associate ended up turning on him and grassing during the trial. So I've been having a look into his time in prison as well, because I've done stories on him previously on Mark Fellows, because as you can imagine, he's killed 2 gangland enforcers who have got a massive reputation up and down the UK. More so Paul Massey, who was well known throughout the prison estate. Massey's name is massive in the high security of prisons. Even after his death, he has got big time gangsters in the high security estate who are out for revenge for the killing of Paul Massey. And Mark Fellows, obviously, who he is, an enforcer himself, also will have friends in the high security estate, but not as many as I believe as Mr. Paul Massey. So in 2019, he was left with a massive scar after being slashed in HMP Whitemore. And it does say in one of the reports that he was airlifted to hospital because the injuries were so severe. Then, when he got transferred up from there, he got transferred up to HMP Wakefield, where this most recent murder took place. And on the 6th of May 2023, he was stabbed up outside his cell inside of HMP Wakefield. And there is, whether or not some of this could or could not be true, but it does say in one of these articles, sources revealed in 2019 that there is a 150 grand price tag on the head of Mark Fellows over the murder of Mr. Big Massey. So whether or not that amount is true or not, I do believe that he will have a price tag on his head as well for that. And it goes to show he's been slashed up, he's been stabbed up, and he himself will be in fear of his life being taken inside of high security prison. And that's probably the reason why they've put him in Wakefield as well, because these type of prisoners normally go into the likes of Whitemore, where he was, Full Sutton, Long Lawton and Franklin. And more often than not, when prisoners have been attacked in the other high security estates, they send them down to Wakefield, where a lot of the time they are more safe, because as I've mentioned in previous videos, that prison is predominantly Bacon's. It used to be 90-10, 90% Bacon's, 10% that type of offender. It is now 60-40, which has only been happening over the most recent couple of years, where they're bringing more and more of the normal location lads down into Wakefield. And like I said in yesterday's video, the inmates are feeling very vulnerable and volatile because of the attacks. And even him himself, even though he's not a Bacon, he will be feeling vulnerable to attack because he'll not know who's landing on the wing at any given time. He's already been attacked twice. He will be having that PTSD thinking, when's the next time? He'll be thinking, when is it? So he's probably thought, right, this is me chance. He's done the murder, if he has. He's been involved in it. He's been charged with it. He'll now be placed on a unit, which is a CSC, a Close Supervision Centre. And he'll be placed inside of there with a handful of other prisoners who he'll probably feel safe with. Some of them don't get let out at the same time, so he will feel more safe being on a unit with a handful of people rather than a wing with another 80 prisoners or 100, depending on which wing you're on. There's up to 100 prisoners. Normally, in the high security prisons, I'm not sure about Wakefield, round about 80 prisoners to a wing. So he will feel more safe not being there, especially if there's a big bounty on his head for what he is in prison for. So, police were met with silence after these murders. We're going back to the murders now. Were met with silence from the public for fear of reprisals after Gangland Hitman killed rivals Paul Massey and John Kinsella. So in one of these articles that I found, whether or not, because you don't know the full ins and outs, only the people that are concerned with these feuds, that are from that area and involved in that gangland scene, will know the exact ins and outs. But I'm just telling you what's in the public domain and what I know from what I've researched. So it does say that it all started with a drink thrown in a nightclub. It led to 4 years of bloodshed, including 2 murders, at least 7 shootings, and an escalation of tit-for-tat violence reminiscent of the Gunchester era of the 1990s. The Salford hitman, nicknamed the Iceman for his calm exterior, fired 18 bullets with an Uzi submachine gun at Massey in July 2015 before shooting dead his associate, John Kinsella, 3 years later. The execution-style murders shocked the criminal underworld of northwest England. Paul Massey, who was 55, had made his name selling drugs in Manchester's 1990s rave scene, but remained a known face in Salford. John Kinsella was respected and feared in equal measure, having intervened when a gangster threatened to maim the former England footballer Steven Gerrard. And John Kinsella, the Merseyside enforcer, was a pallbearer at Paul Massey's funeral. The unsolved murder of Paul Massey loomed over Greater Manchester Police for 3 years. Detectives had 112 names as possible suspects, a who's who of the Salford underworld, while facing a wall of silence from the public who feared repercussions if they spoke. Even when a 7-year-old boy and his mother were shot in their legs on their doorstep as the feud escalated, no witnesses were forthcoming. It made solving the murder more difficult than policing the notorious violence in Manchester's Moss Side in the 80s and 90s. DCI Carl Jones, who worked on Paul Massey investigation, described it as probably the most taxing and at times frustrating he and his team had ever faced. When you have organised crime incidents, the obvious thing is people will not speak. You have the frustration of the victims' families who want us, quite rightly, to solve it quickly. It's sensitive and complex and so frustrating. The murders were part of what described as war between the rival Salford gangs, the A-Team, which was associated with Paul Massey, and the anti-A-Team. Detectives believe it started when a woman threw a drink over a member of the A-Team in a nightclub in the summer 2014. Months later, the roof of a woman's VW Golf car was hacked off using a still saw. The violence escalated into a year of chaos as a shotgun was fired into a car, injuring one man, before another victim suffered horrific injuries in a machete attack. In 2015, a hand grenade was thrown at the A-Team's family member's house, luckily exploding outside the property. A series of reprisal shootings followed as detectives struggled to contain the violence. Mark Fellows was already in the frame for Massey's murder when he gunned down Kinsella in May 2018. The modus operandi of the killings was strikingly similar: execution-style shootings by a man believed to have fled by bicycle, but the breakthrough came when detectives investigating the Kinsella murder found a Garmin watch used by Fellows for long-distance running. The watch, it transpired, had recorded the hitman carrying out a reconnaissance run shortly before Massey's killing. Its data correlated with the hundreds of hours of CCTV and mobile phone data that had been analysed by officers from both forces. There were gasps in the tight security courtroom during the trial as Fellows' associate Stephen Boyle broke the gangland code of silence and grasped on him, telling jurors it was more than likely his former friend had done it. Fellows was later seen making a cutthroat gesture to his co-defendant. Now, that is going to get anybody convicted. If he's standing up, he's co-accused, saying it's more than likely that he'd done it. The jury would have just went, right, case solved, it's him. So sentencing the men at Liverpool Crown Court, Mr. Justice Davis said, whatever the background of Mr. Kinsella and Mr. Massey, the impact on families of their murders had been devastating. This was execution pure and simple. And he was sentenced to life without parole. His accomplice, Stephen Boyle, was jailed for a minimum of 33 years after being found guilty of the murder of Kinsella but cleared of the murder of Massey. And that is obviously because he's grassed and he's probably took a deal or whatever and he hasn't been done for that. They've probably said, if you grass, you will not get life without parole, but he's still going to have to serve a staggering 33 years before he's considered for parole. But Stephen Boyle he would have been straight on the bacon wings. Obviously for the murders, because he'll have a hit on top of him as well. Because of what he done. He's obviously been found guilty on the John Kinsella murder, and he was present at both the murders. Also, he's a grass, so he will be spending his time living amongst the bacons also. But, like I've said, because of all that, and as I've just read there, how serious this gangland feud has been, all these things, shootings, hand grenades, all been going on over the years, you can see how serious these firms were and are. And Mark Fellows, will feel more safe and secure living in a unit with a handful of people and not having much contact with the other prisoners. Because like I've said, he's been attacked twice whilst inside a prison. And there would have been further attacks because it's only a matter of time before he would have been transferred either to Frankland or Long Lawton or somewhere similar where he will feel vulnerable and not knowing who was on that wing and whether or not he's going to get attacked. So he's probably thought to himself, right, I've got me chance here. He's getting a hold of Kyle Bevan, who is an absolute despicable wrong'un. I'll not go over the majority of the case because I spoke about it in the previous videos, and I'm assuming everyone who's watching this video now will have seen that one. But if you haven't, go back and have a look at my previous videos where I'm talking more in depth about these murders. But on November the 5th, Kyle Bevan was murdered inside his pad. He was beaten to a pulp, strangled to death, put inside of his bed. So when the screws were doing the checks, it looked as though he was fast asleep, which he was, never to wake up again. But again, he is an absolute past tense. He was an absolute despicable human being, not even called a human being, a disgusting piece of garbage. That's all he was. But that absolute wrong'un is no more. He was murdered, allegedly by the 3 people inside of that pad, which Mark Fellows was one of them, along with Lee Newell and David Thompson. But that wrong'un was in prison serving life with a minimum of 28 years for the murder of baby Lola, 2-year-old, which was his partner's baby, his partner's toddler, who he was beaten up on numerous occasions, and he subjected her to 6 hours of torture before he actually murdered her. Absolute wrong'un, and he got exactly what he deserved. Luckily, he didn't ever wake up again because he could have went on to get release. I think he was 33 or 35 now. He'd been in for a few years. He would have been eligible for parole when he was around about 60 or in his 60s. So he would have been out of prison one day. Luckily now, he will never be walking the streets again. That horrible wrong'un is no more. And like I've said, if Mark Fellows is convicted on that murder, he will then be known as a serial killer. Now, I think that's summed just about everything up about Mark Fellows. I went over just about everything about the murders, how he ended up serving life without parole, and his most recent murder. So hopefully that's cleared up a lot for the new subscribers. But there is previous videos that I've done on him, and I will be doing more updated videos on his now co-accused Lee Newell, who this is Lee Newell's second murder inside a prison. Lee Newell is serving life without parole for killing another child killer inside of HMP Long Lawton. But later on in the week, I'm going to do an updated version, because I did speak about this probably about a year ago when I was covering people serving life without parole. Lee Newell was one of the ones that I covered, but I'm going to do an updated video later in the week. So people, keep an eye out for that one. And as usual, if you're enjoying the content, remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Make sure you've hit the notification bell so you don't miss another video. Enjoy the rest of your day, people, but more importantly, stay safe.